Good morning and welcome to the She Speaks at 10 show. She Speaks at 10 show में आपका स्वागत है. Today we are in conversation with Ms. Vinita Sethi, who is SVP and Chief Public Affairs at Apollo Hospitals Group. In a career spanning over 2 decades, she has worked with corporates and industry associations in senior positions. She is an economist from Delhi School of Economics and specializes in international relations from International University of Japan. She was president of Lady Shri Ram College Alumni Association ELSA Executive Committee from 2017 to 2019. She is passionate about developmental issues and she has helped in setting up Ek Soch Sandbox for social entrepreneurship. Currently, she is one of the co-conveners of Women's Mentorship Forum in FICCI FLO, led Empowering the Great 50% initiative. She is also working on accelerating inclusion for women. Welcome, Ms. Vinita Sethi.
Thank you and namaste to everybody. A very happy Republic Day. I'm super thrilled to be here today. And before I tell you whatever I have of my story, I want to give a big shout out to Ambra Foundation for creating this platform, and even a bigger shout out to its founder, Vinita Sharma Bakshi. You know, Vinita met me some years ago, and I was so impressed with the passion. There were so many women conferences being held, but what stood her apart was that she was creating a platform to promote women dialogue. It was about connecting women. It was about women speaking about issues that they are not really comfortable talking about. So when Vinita asked me to do this, there was no way I couldn't, even during the unprecedented challenges of today. And I work in healthcare. And today being a holiday and Republic Day, I still felt that I had to come on this platform and talk to you all. Before we start, I must also let you know of a very wonderful mental health and counseling pipeline that Ambra Foundation, She Speaks, also Vinita's a baby, she founded She Speaks, is there for all women who have any distress issues to call. It's a toll-free line. The number is 1-800-833-2300. I think it's a wonderful initiative because mental health is something that still carries a lot of stigma. There's still a lot of shyness about talking of issues as women. So feel free and connect with this helpline. Thank you again, Vinita. I think you're there, and Ambra Foundation, and thank you all for joining me here. So every woman has a story. Where do I weave mine? There's so many pieces, and I actually think about it. I'm sitting here, and this is where I started my journey. I was born in the 60s, but I say I'm a child of 70s and 80s. Being an army brat, my father was in the army who served 10 years in Ladakh and Kargil, often in non-family stations. And he was very close to, he was in the signals, which is very close to the Russian telecom equipment manufacturer. So he was quite an expert in the language. But that is where I think the seeds of a lot of who I am today were sown. The journey began as a little girl who couldn't really see her father for 10 years, but for short durations during summer holidays, I would travel and by train to Udhampur, to Jammu, and take the 1 tons, those army big jeeps and trucks, swinging from side to side with so many other army kids and families, and have a beautiful time in Kashmir. Money was never even an issue because we had access to everything. As a girl, I would say, doing everything that a very, very privileged girl would do, from horse riding to golfing to learning how to, even ski. And but one thing that I always felt was I used to cry when I was put in a train back each time to come back home, and I would see my father go for all the wars that he went to. So those were times of turbulence, and I would wonder, what if something happened to my father? Who would take care of me? I was the oldest child. Who would take care of my mother, who was actually very fragile always, and who would take care of my brother? So I would say there was this sense of insecurity. And I remember once I asked my dad, and he said, there will always be times in your life when you would feel that you're totally alone. And there are two things that will stand by you. One, you have to be able to look, straight into your challenges, become fearless. And you will become fearless only if you are, what he at that time said, educationally empowered. So I think somewhere this little girl started taking her academics very seriously. What is strange is I was in a family where, I had a services background, and my mother came from a very old, um, more conservative business family, very well known in India. So I was always in a very dichotomous setting. This is again a huge learning that I must share with you. I had seen my aunts from my maternal side, some of them highly educated, masters from Delhi School of Economics at that time, you know, in teaching. But whenever they spoke in the family matters, I always saw the brothers taking lead. I always saw the men being asked to advise. I always saw my grandparents handing over the keys of the business, of the car, everything to the boy of the house. In fact, in spite of all the education, full respect was given to the girls. I mean, don't think that was not the case. But there was a sense of obligation. If a brother did something for the sister had to feel obliged that my brother is so kind and he's doing this for me. I also had a brother, so I was in fact always doing things as an older child, tutoring my brother who was 4 years younger to me because my father wasn't around. Would cycle to school, was taking care of all banking activities from the time I was 12, 13, 14, getting the drafts, going with my mother to hospitals, to army canteens. So I could never understand that what is it that a man can do better than a woman. I think so. These were some of the ideas that I was exposed to at a very early age. So as I studied in Delhi, and there was a turning point because I was a science student, and I got into AFMC, which is the Armed Forces Medical College. I was totally in awe of the uniform. And also, I think there was again something that I wanted to do. I associated being in the army to becoming fearless. But my mom's health didn't allow me to, and I very hesitantly gave up my AFMC and joined economics at Lady Shri Ram College. That was a turning point because I felt somewhere my dreams had been shattered at that time. I always wanted to be a doctor, and I couldn't. So I think those 6 months in the college initially was a time of great adjustment. I was in an all women's college, coming from an environment where always I was with boys at home and in army camps and everywhere. It took me time to adjust to the environment. Taking ladies special, and then at that time we didn't have the mobiles. So I had learned how to drive, and I would take the car, park it, and come back. But that's where I also started getting exposure to what you could call more feminist ideology. Why I'm calling it feminist is because this was a great opportunity to learn about gender. I was in an environment where a lot of like-minded girls were actually discussing career plans. There were women who wanted to get into IAS, etc. And they all came from different backgrounds. Then, as I was graduating, came a second kind of a jolt because there was a lot of pressure from one side of the family for me to get married. If my mother had her way at that time, I would have got married by then. I think I was about 19 or 20. So, and that's the time I also got into Delhi School of Economics. Again, it took a lot of grit. I used to hear things from some members of the family. You're getting education so that you're prepared for any adversity in your life, but you don't have to work. And I was like, but it's not only because I want to work, it's also because I want to be me. I want to be able to look after myself, be able to travel, be able to have the right to choose what I want. So, well, one didn't get married. I got into Delhi School of Economics. I did my master's. It was gruelous, and I had to travel, like many of us did at that time, in youth specials from Delhi University back to South Delhi, where I lived. And that's where I learned another very wonderful thing, that how important it is to be able to navigate yourself in public spaces. And I'm telling you this because law and order situation even then wasn't that conducive, And there were times when I had to study late at night in the RTL, the library at college, and I would have to come back home. So occasionally I would drive back, but I always was told that if you are getting late, you stay back at your grandmother's house who lives close by. So these things made me feel that, that's the other thing. If women have to move ahead, how do we really empower ourselves to be able to take care of ourselves? Then came a huge turning point in my life. I think my mother had had enough, and she's like, now you've done your master's, you can get a job, get married. And so once again, I was really not wanting to do either PhD or get into IAS, but I was very keen to do development economics and study gender. And there was a lovely program in Japan in collaboration with TUC in the International University of Japan. I got full scholarship. Being an army kid, that was the only way I could go. So I really studied hard, took that scholarship, and left for Japan. And as I left, you wouldn't believe something very strange happened. I was at the airport when a father of a kid who was studying in the same university came to me and handed me a bunch of letters and a book. And he said, can you give this to my son who shares the same dorm as you do? In fact, his room is just 2 rooms next to yours. So my father looked up and said, what do you mean share the dorm? He said, yeah, it's the co-ed dorm. My father, who's so progressive and always told me the world is your oyster, looked at me and said, but you never told me you were going into a co-ed dorm. So I just said, Dad, I'm hearing it for the first time myself. And then he was suddenly like, he couldn't say you can't go or anything. And I boarded the flight and I reached Japan. I didn't know the language. This was my first visit to a foreign country. So I land and I take the Shinkansen and the bullet train and reach the university. What shocked me there was the very skewed distribution. We were just like 5 girls to 200 students. And it was a multicultural place. It was a co-ed dorm. And there's since again no mobiles and nothing. Very cold place. I mean, it snowed there 6 months a year. And I would walk to the library at night. I was not at all fluent, conversant with computer skills. And I remember those huge Macintosh computers and a computer table. I learned how to type. It was again something that I'd never done. In India, I had the comforts of a home, and being in the army, one does have a lot of comforts of oddlies and army messes. But there, I had to learn how to cook initially because it took time to adjust to the Japanese food. So for me, my life got packed into another challenge. And for me, either it was, there were times when I was like, why am I doing this? I should just go back home and get married. But then I slowly realized that there were so many other men and few women who were there who had come all the way here and were living life which was so different. And that's when I learned you have to be able to push your comfort level. You have to be able to cry sometimes at night just to get up in the morning and look at the fresh snow and a new day and say, okay, I can do this. So it took me about 3 months, and I kept pushing myself. I started learning the language. I did everything, from cooking to learning how to type, learning my thesis, going to classes. It was very, very cold for an Indian girl, but it was a great learning. And the best learning that happened was the cross-cultural gender learning. And there were times when I started working after graduating in Bangkok, Tokyo, in Japan. And that was when I realized how lucky and how fortunate I was, because I could say no. Japan's a wonderful country, but in the 80s, late 80s, when I was there, to be precise, 87 to 91, I was doing very well in the world economy. But women were mostly staying at home, very much like India. Women were homemakers and men would be working. And I saw that despite everything, the women in Japan had a huge financial prowess. All the salaries would come to them and they were the primary decision makers for investments. However, very few women were working and many women were getting married to foreigners. So I had lots of friends and I asked them, there's a reason being that, yes, one, we are expected to spend a lot more time being homemakers. And it's a very homogeneous society. So even at work, I used to keep going to my HR. They were so sick of me. They would ask me to do certain things, certain ways, which are very traditional. And I thought they were not very good for gender equality. And I would go and say, but Why in a board meeting do I have to sit in the second row when my peer is sitting in the first row? So, those that really taught me that it is effort yourself. And not to get confused, one has to stay open. What I used to find irritating about Indian uh, ideologies at times, I actually found when I was in Japan, I was able to say a lot more no. I was able to walk up to my seniors and demand that this is how I would like equality to work for me, and negotiate, my workplace. So, this was again a very important learning lesson. So when I came back to India and I got married, that was another chapter in my life. And I came back, got married, started a career with another industry association. And that was a time when it hit me that despite all the comforts that we have in India, parents and parent-in-laws, if you're a working woman, you know, just like we say that homemakers are working women, they truly are. But as a working woman, I realized that I was both a homemaker and a working woman. I was doing double the work. My husband was a very progressive, is still a very progressive person, and he had started his own business. So for whatever reasons, I found myself with a little kid coming home, taking care of my kid. Maybe my husband was traveling a lot. And I realized that, my folks, and even at work, I was told that, sometimes you're just a remote mom. So when I went to work, I don't mean to belittle anyone here, but I think there was this bias towards working mothers. If I had to pick up my bag and leave at 6, I was told that, oh, you talk of equality, but then you don't stay back. And, if you stayed back and wrote some homework sheets for your child, you were told that you were a remote mom. So I think there were a lot of times when that kind of guilt is meant to creep into you. And I would sometimes come home and even cry, because my son would be running fever. And, here I am stuck in a meeting till 7:30 in the evening. And on one hand, I go to my HR and says, hey, you know, I also need this as my peer male colleague is getting. And on the other hand, when he turns around and says, oh, but you barely stay back, and then you do stay back also for work, and you have a son, with high fever, and your mother or mother-in-law tells you you're neglecting your child, it does hit you. But there was a way out again, it took me a lot of conversations with senior women colleagues, with others cross-sector, and I realized I could create a support system. I could create a network of friends. I don't have to only depend on my mother and mother-in-law. I can hire people, good people who will be able to help me take care of my child. And then I had 2 children, 2 boys. So I continued to work for a long time. Till growth in Indian organizations in 90s was very different. We had opened up, as you know, in 91, the economy was opening up. I was very involved with industry. There was a lot of traveling. I was heading global operations of many countries for my company. I was literally traveling 14 days a week. I had a stroller bag, and I used to always put my saris, so that I never knew I had visas for so many countries. I would just pick up my bag and leave. But every time I reached the airport, I would cry. I would cry because I would wonder, oh, will they wake up my son and oh, this one has his exam and I'm not going to be there. I used to tell my husband I hate traveling. And I used to reach the airport and see families having holidays. And I was like, God, I'm stuck in this work. But the moment I would land in a country, it would be so different. I would enter the border. I would get into engaging conversations. I knew I was doing stuff which would make some impact. And it was always nice to be able to go out and see new places, also to be able to take your check and buy things and do things without asking anyone, without taking anyone's permission. So we continued to work. My kids grew up. I had support. I was fortunate that I had support. One lesson that I did learn, however, was even when I was traveling, and this is very important, especially for all the young women who travel today. Even in Japan, I would take a backpack. So I'd been exposed to traveling a lot. I would go to South Korea. I would travel to the US on my own. But when you traveled for work, there's so many things you have to do. And you're often traveling with men who you don't know from different parts. So one thing I realized was, and today you hear so much about sexual harassment. You hear so much. I mean, Me Too has opened a huge box of what you should know and what you shouldn't uh, agree to at all. And there are incidents that happen where I would say, like people would approach you and say, hey, we have this meeting tomorrow. I thought we should have dinner tonight, and whatever, and we can figure out things. So there's just so many different ways where certain things are conveyed to you. So it was very important to understand the laws. And I was lucky, I had lawyer friends. I was also fortunate that I had a lot of senior women who traveled with me, and I used to really observe them on how they tackled diplomatically without offending, but at the same time stood their ground and said, this is how it is going to be. So I think it's a very important lesson. And find yourself a mentor. It's very important. I was lucky I had mentors. So it's very important to have a mentor sometimes to take you through some of these life experiences. And if anything happens, don't be shy. It's very important to nail something and nip it in the bud right there. Nothing is more important than your own self-esteem. Don't let anyone smash it. That's a very important lesson. Even if you're traveling, I remember once I was traveling to one of the African countries in a car, and we were going to one of the universities for lectures, and it was one of these big limos where the seats face each other. There were two men here, one here, and me here, three men, and they were all from different nationalities. One was an Indian. I didn't know him, but he was one of my delegation member. And so they asked me questions, and I put a bindi and I was wearing a sari. They asked me about the bindi sari and, of festivals in India and, or you all really worship your husband. So I just inadvertently mentioned that, well, that's not true. And we do have festivals and there's something called, fasting for your husband, but I have never done it and I don't do it. So the man was grossly upset with me. He looked at it, said to me in Hindi, "Aap aisa kyun keh rahe hai? Why are you saying this?" I looked back and I said, well, because I'm absolutely not being demeaning to anyone, but I think for me, one, I don't believe in a ritual like that, and two, I think I'm equally important to myself and my kids and to my husband. For both of us, if we have to keep a fast for each other, neither he nor I can stay hungry for that matter, and we let it pass. And one of the African gentlemen then said, I just tried to take the another level. And he said, so how many, I asked him, how are women in your country treated? He says, oh, women are good. Most of them work. So, they're happy homemakers. And I looked outside. This was in, I think, 98. I looked out and I saw a lot of women carrying baskets and, working in the fields. And I looked, I said, but they're all women working. So, so that's the other thing. It doesn't matter whether you're working outside your house or you're working at home. A homemaker's work is very underappreciated. Any work that you do is work. So don't let anyone make you believe that you have to step out of the house you valued for who you are. Kind of something I would really appeal towards you. Let me come from my journey from that end to, I did take a little bit of a sabbatical when my kids were, in their high school and they were planning to go abroad. And that's the time a fatigue had also set up. So again, that time I heard things like, oh, you're at the pinnacle of your career. Why are you giving up now? It had taken me almost 15 years and 18 to reach where I was. There were times when I had to literally bring at the table to be heard. There were times in meetings where I would see all women huddled, senior women huddled in one corner, and no one opening her mouth. And when I would speak, people would laugh when the meeting would go, I had to speak. It didn't, as by then, make a difference to me because I had to speak what I had to, because that's what my life was going to be. So when I quit again, everyone was like, oh, we need you. The doors are always going to be open for you at work. Come back whenever you want. And I decided that now I have to get my blinkers off. I had been so focused on my work and everything. I'm just seeing if my time is up, or just 5 more minutes. So I decided that I had to get my blinkers off and do something I'm very passionate about. And this is where I have very important input to give. We women often shy of women networks. We've seen clubs and mothers, and even in the army, a lot of women partying and being together. I had shied of women networks in a big way. I had colleagues and all to talk to, And I created a network of friends who were like colleagues. But it's important, if you reach that stage in your life where you have some experiences, to give back to the women community and to give back to any community where inclusion and diversity is an objective. So I went back to a lot of such things. I set up a social entrepreneurship um, sandbox with like-minded people. I helped them locate it, find women entrepreneurs. I connected with a lot of similar philanthropists, like-minded people who were in social space. Then I also, got back to my college after 35 years and realized how wonderfully our women from Lady Sridham were empowered in doing so many things. And then this whole thing of digital inclusion came, when Corona has so disrupted lives that some of us got together and set up a digital inclusion initiative as alumni, where we decided to provide laptops. We did fundraisers, and we're still continuing that work. So there comes a point in your life when you have to do what you really like to do. You're comfortable in your life. You're an empty nester. So you have to sometimes detach yourself also from the story of the past. It's an evolving story. So move on. Your parents are aging. Today I'm a primary caregiver to my parents, and it's another relationship. It's another challenge. It breaks you down sometimes. To see your rocks kind of becoming so fragile. But then you have to get busy. You have to be able to share more with others, and I think that's where Ambra's mental health is very important. Believe me, when I seek therapy for my father and my mother, I also talk to the therapist, because as a caregiver, there are times when I'm completely exhausted. It's really good. It gives you a lot of solutions. Stay very healthy, eat healthy, exercise. So important. I cycle a lot. I do a lot of yoga. Online yoga is a bliss. I do meditation, and I eat well and go for regular health checkups. That's very critical. For me, my yearly regular health checkup is sacrosanct. I have to do it. So, and be happy. End of the day, my only thing is just be very happy. Your happiness is your own choice. You will always have people criticizing you, always have people saying nasty things about you. It's up to you. I mean, I'm not saying you just sit back and let the world throw curveballs at you, but you assert yourself. Don't let it get under your skin. There are times when I'm really upset and I find women networks actually pulling women down more than men do. And to be honest, 80% of my friends are men. And this is my big appeal again to women. Try and understand, try and open up. Things change. Youngsters have a lot to teach us. Please don't be so close. Just as you listen to your children, you have to listen to their voices. I mean, I'm in my late 50s, and I think I would love to, this is my last piece, actually see ourselves down the line with a big cup of coffee, maybe walking down the steps of Berkeley, surrounded by young boys, and help me do my PhD. So that's it for me. Any questions, Apollina?
Yes, ma'am. That was a great
So
talk.
we're just seeing if there are any questions in the chat. Yeah.
Yes. There are no questions for now.
Hmm. So there's nothing much, but just that if there's this one I'd like to you all in these pressing times, and let me just end by saying, nothing lasts forever. You have your lows and you have peaks, and in between there'll be times when everything looks peaceful. Ride it as you would. Stay centered. Have a great time, and thank you all for joining me. Thank you. Namaste. Can I request Vinita to join me and in for the audience or for anybody here, please?
Yes, ma'am. Vinita Bakshi ma'am will be joining us now.
Thank you.
Yes.
Vinita's amazing. I read her books as well. So take time out to check her out on Google and Ambra Foundation for her amazing work. Hi,
Hi,
Vinita.
Vinita.
Can't hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was really, really touching, how you've done everything, how you created a balance between, your workspace, back home, parents. But the thing is, you know, uh, there are many women who may not find that kind of support system at home, uh, a very agreeable husband, or even in that financial capacity where they can hire a support system for themselves. Would you have any advice for them?
I mean, I just like, I don't come from a background where to get your rations, where you will have access to clubs, but you have to keep recycling had to get onto a scooter or a three-wheeler and go. She had sciatica, and she could barely sit on the. She literally had to sometimes, lie down on the scooter, and I would be holding her head. So I think my only thing is, you have to, if you don't have that kind of support, one, you have to somewhere create it for yourself. You'll have to, it is challenging. It is hugely challenging. Sometimes physically, I also used to get very tired. I would run to the bank. My mom couldn't even get off the bed. She had to roll down the bed to get me out of the bed. So I think you have to those
So
challenges.
multiple
And I
situations
used,
that we play, even sometimes even without being appreciated, and we are not even looking for appreciation. It comes so naturally to us to double or triple ourselves
yeah.
in all the roles which are
But I
there.
think what is important is at that time to find your space, whether right now we have so many online courses of yoga, of calling up therapy for therapy, but we still don't use them.
Yeah,
And I think if you can give the first 20 minutes of your morning to just spacing out and seeing what is it that you can do. Also, don't push everything. You don't have to finish everything
you're
today.
right.
Take time off. It's so important to just go out and take that walk when things are very hard pressing and you're just giving up. That's when you realize you don't have to give up.
Absolutely. And one other minor observation which I completely conquered, it happens to all of us when we are navigating this thin line, in your workspace, and the subtle remarks, lunch or dinner. How do
Yeah.
you navigate your immediate boss? You don't want to say yes. You can't say a blatant no, which sounds like a slap on the face. How do you navigate your way through such situations? Because something which seems so delicate, so tricky, and hugely challenging for each and every one of us.
But at the back of your mind, you have to believe that you will not get yourself into a situation which you're going to regret later.
Absolutely.
And there are times when you won't believe, and I'll just take 1 second. I go to Harare for a summit, and I was called to the office. I was some days before this that you have to go to Harare. I said it's a long way off, and how am I going to go? He says no, this particular industrialist is going. It's his private car, and we have chosen you because you know how to handle yourself. I was stunned. I looked at my boss. I said, "What do you mean I can handle myself?" He said, "Because you're the only one who knows Africa besides the two other people, and the gentleman is down with tuberculosis, and the other lady says she's scared to go, so you go." I said, "But why did you have to say this that I can handle myself? What if I mess up? What if I just something happens and I just throw a fit and walk away?" No, you will be able to handle. So there was trust that my boss had shown on me. But at the same time, he told me certain things that you don't have to compromise in any way. You feel uncomfortable. You have to walk away. So I knew I could do that and I would have done that. But at the same time, I was so
Yes,
firm and I was so professional. And you learn through experience. On
absolutely.
your eyes speak,
Absolutely.
your gestures speak.
Absolutely. And I strongly believe that one small percentage of women who give up in such situations, probably they, should I say, bring make the movement weaker. When there are
Yeah.
so
Also, there
many.
are times, and probably I wouldn't want to generalize. Maybe they give in. Maybe they were just too scared. Maybe there was a bigger loss they were going to face. So
Yes.
I'm not going to blame them, but at the same time,
Yes.
as far as possible, also understand the rules and the laws, you know.
Yes.
And you should have your office. If you have your own business and doing it, you must understand what you're going in for. And if
Yes.
nothing should happen to you which you don't want. That's very
Absolutely.
critical.
Learn to say no, firm no.
Totally learn to say no. And there may be a lot of stories cooked up, you know, on your behavior. It may affect you professionally, but then it's your choice.
Yes. At
I
least
think
we
it's
could know that it's something we chose, something which we
yeah,
want
yeah,
this way.
yeah. So I was never a boxer or a strong woman who could punch anyone. But you know, if it had come to it, I could have even done that. I made my
Vinita,
choices.
yes. And proud that I have a namesake like you. And
So
happy
am I.
Republic Day to everybody. And thank you so much for joining this show. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Vinita.
Vinita. Bye bye.
Great honor having you. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you.
Bye.